In this lesson, we're going to cover the concept of federation. In the world of identity and access management, federation refers to a process that allows for the linking of electronic identities and attributes to store that information across multiple distinct identity management systems. Federation allows users to use the same username, password, or other credentials to log into multiple systems managed by different organizations. But this is more like a single sign-on than a password reuse type of situation. Federations work by using the trusted relationships that exist between different systems. When a user logs into a system, that system can then use the federation to verify the user's identity with another system. Federation is a concept that extends beyond the traditional boundaries of an organization's network and instead recognizes that there is a need for your network to be accessible to a broader group of users, including not just your employees, but your partners, suppliers, and customers as well. While managing employee accounts can be straightforward, managing accounts for each partner, supplier, or customer internally can be much more challenging. This is where federation comes into play, by allowing the organization's network to trust accounts created and managed by a different network. This means that a supplier or customer can authenticate using their own network credentials, and then your company's network can trust this authentication because of a pre-established trust relationship between the two systems. Now let's take a quick look at a simplified step-by-step approach that is occurring when someone tries to log into a system using a federation. To log in using a federation, you'll follow a 6-step process, including login initiation, redirection to an identity provider, authenticating the user, generation of an assertion, returning to a service provider, verification and access, and finally, the login is complete. First, the user will initiate a login. This occurs when the user accesses a service or application and chooses to log in. The system will recognize that it's a federated login based on the domain and the user's credentials or other predefined criteria. Second, the user will be redirected to the identity provider. The service or application, often termed the service provider, will redirect the user to the home network or identity provider, known as the IDP, for authentication. And this is where the user's credentials are being stored and they will be used to validate the specific user. Third, we have to authenticate the user. Once the user enters their credentials, such as their username or password with the identity provider will validate the user's identity, which serves as the authentication mechanism during their login activity. Fourth, we have the generation of an assertion. Once authenticated, the identity provider will create an assertion, usually a token that includes information about the user's identity, their authentication status, and possibly other attributes. This assertion is created in a standardized format depending on which protocol is being used, such as SAML or OpenID Connect. Fifth, the user is returned to the service provider. This redirection will cause the user to be returned to the initial service or application that they wanted to access, which we refer to as the service provider, with the assertion that they just received from the identity provider. Sixth, verification and access occurs. During this step, the service provider will verify the assertion to ensure that it's from a trusted identity provider, and then the service provider will grant the user access based off the information and the assertion. And now, the federation process is complete. The user now has access to the service or application and potentially others within the federation without needing to log in again. From an endpoint user perspective, federation is a great thing because they only need to have a single account to be able to access a wide variety of services and applications. To configure a federation across multiple organizational networks, we usually rely on a technology like SAML, OAuth, and OpenID Connect as our authentication and authorization protocols. Federations offer us benefits including simplified user experience, reduced administrative overhead, and increased security. Since federations require that a user only has to remember one set of credentials, this makes the entire login process much simpler and much more efficient. Also, since organizations don't need to manage accounts for every individual user, and instead they can just trust the authentication provided by the user's home network, this helps to reduce the administrative overhead required from our organizations. And since users are less likely to reuse passwords or resort to insecure password storage methods, the security of the network is improved and the risk of password-related security breaches is reduced. So remember, using a federation allows users to utilize the same username, password, or other credentials to log into multiple systems managed by different organizations. Federations work by using a trusted relationship between different systems offering several benefits, which include improved user experience, increased productivity, reduced IT costs, and enhanced security.